Welcome to the Faith and Feelings podcast. My name is Taylor Joy, and I'm passionate about helping you untangle and honor your emotions, authentically practice your faith, and integrate both into your everyday life so that you can experience the goodness and delight that comes from living in relationship with yourself, God, and others. Thank you for joining me. Let's get started. We all have a deep and inherent need for love and acceptance. But as children, what happens when unconditional love and acceptance were not freely given? In small ways, many of us learn that a packaging of self is what is necessary to find approval and affirmation in the eyes of others. As we begin to develop and experience life in the context of our closest relationships and social circles, we learn that we are liked and accepted by constructing a version of ourselves that puts us in the most flattering light. Maybe if we help enough, self-sacrifice enough, do all the right things, maybe then we will be loved. In this conversation with a family friend, Ellen, she shares a recent story of dysregulation triggered by a childhood belief that equated being perfect with being loved. She shares her own journey of growing in self-awareness, untangling this belief from her story, and learning to rest in the unmerited favor of God. As always, if you enjoy this conversation, I'd be so grateful if you took a minute to rate and review the podcast. This is an easy way to partner with me and is invaluable in reaching new listeners. So let's go now to my conversation with Ellen. Well, welcome to Faith and Feelings, Ellen. I'm so glad you're here.
Thank you. It's good to be with you, Taylor.
So I was thinking about it earlier this morning, and if I'm remembering right, I think our families first met in 2008 when we first moved overseas and you and your husband were leading our international missions organization. You have always had such a special place in your heart for missionary kids. And I know that you've tracked with my life since I was 9. I'm always so amazed by the specific questions that you ask about my life whenever we're together. And even though I know we don't get to connect often, you've always modeled what it looks like to truly see and care for people's hearts.
That's very kind. Thank you.
Well, we are wrapping up a series on the podcast right now called Why on Earth Did I Do or Say That? And in this series, I'm inviting different guests to share and process a story of when their emotional response to a situation was a 7 or 8 on a scale when it was warranted a 2 or 3. We all have so many moments like this, but we don't often pause and reflect on the deeper story that we're living out in these moments. When I was thinking about the people that I'd love to have on, I thought about you. So Ellen, to get started, would you mind sharing a story of when you were emotionally dysregulated?
Well, the one that came to mind happened about 2 weeks ago. And my husband and I are very involved with my parents' caregiving. We live out of town from my parents, but we make frequent trips. We were on one of those trips, and it was the last day, and we had kind of scheduled tightly. And we were going to visit some friends, and then we're going to go see my parents, and then leave town because we had another appointment. So as we were on our way to this appointment with friends, it was tight, but we could make it on time if we went straight there. Then my husband said, "Oh, by the way, we got to stop and get donuts." And I was like, "What? We can't stop and get donuts? That'll take an extra 15 minutes. I said, "We're going to be late if we stop and get donuts." And he was like, "Well, I promised I would bring donuts." And I just felt myself getting frustrated. I started getting upset with him. He wouldn't change his mind because he had promised, which is fair enough. But I was getting tenser by the moment. And I could tell it was really impacting.
Oh, that's such a relatable story, Ellen. Thank you for sharing that. So you mentioned that you were feeling frustrated.
Right.
What other emotions were you feeling in the car that day?
Well, I was really feeling this sense that I was going to make them feel like they're not important. If we're late, they're not going to feel like we consider them important, or they might not feel like we care. And I felt like it was honoring to them to be on time. And so, I had this back and forth. I understood my husband's desire to bring the donuts. But on the other hand, I didn't want to cut our time with them short because of what that would look like,
Yeah. How long do you think you'd felt that tension, that fear inside of you? Was it just that day? Had it been a week, a year, 10 years?
Well, I mean, I've seen, can I say, scenarios like this one through the years for many, many years. And so I've become more aware of them. But it had been building because there were a lot of things going on during the week that happened. And there was a lot of pressure. So I think that it was a culmination of things. But the fact is that I let it get to me. A little thing got to me.
So you said that you've been noticing and processing scenarios like this one over the years. Mm-hmm. When do you think you first began to recognize and get curious about dysregulating moments and how they're connected to your story?
Well, it's been a growing process of recognizing that, but it's been, more than 15 years maybe that I've been on this road of being more aware of what's going on. And I have come to understand more of what's happening inside of me. And and I can trace it back very early. But as far as seeing these incidents, it's been maybe 15 years. And it was through others who were walking with me that helped me to become more self-aware and then causing me to pursue the Lord in that.
So I'm just picturing you in the car that day, driving with your husband. And as you're having this conversation about whether or not to stop to get donuts, you feel your body start to react with frustration, with some anxiety. Yeah. What did you feel about those feelings in the moment?
Well, it was hard and frustrating because I knew that it was like a shame storm. And because I could recognize that it was actually more about me than about them. And that's what is hard when I come to realize, wait a minute, this is more about, I don't want to look bad. I don't want them to think badly of me. And so, I think that brings a shame, this shame on me, like, this is all about me.
Oh, that's so good. So first you felt frustrated. Then you started feeling some shame as you began to realize, like, oh, wait, I think this is more about me.
Yes.
What did you want to do when that shame began to wash over you?
I think I wanted to know that you don't have to feel that shame, that there is a place to go that's safe, that brings you out of that shame. You don't have to feel that anymore. Just the hope that I can escape out of that. And there's that battle of knowing that staying there was a pride thing, because I needed to, ask my husband to forgive me for being so reactive to him and getting upset with him. But I think, just wanting to know, okay, there's a place where I can come out of this, the off ramp.
That's good.
Yeah. And the other thought is, I think at the deepest level, I wanted to know, it's okay. It's okay if I'm not perfect. It's okay if I'm not on time. It's not going to, be this big deal if we're late. And yet I'm making a big deal out of it. So just to know that it's okay. You can let that go.
Oh, that's good. Yeah. Were you able to pinpoint what was underneath that shame storm?
Well, probably only because the Lord's had me on a journey of discovery and of healing. And I've come to realize that shame is coming from a place of feeling like I have to do things in a best way and be, can I say perfect? It's a little strong, but I need to act in a way that is going to be honorable and is not going to hurt my reputation. It's not going to make me look bad, that it's not going to rob me of someone's affection. I mean, really, the deeper thing is this going to rob me of their affection because I'm not living up to the expectations? And I've come to the point of realizing expectations often are the stumbling block for me. And that's where the shame can come in.
When you think about that shame storm that you were feeling in the car that day, can you remember what was happening in your body?
I mean, I was just tense. And I know the tenseness was because I didn't know how things were going to turn out. And I guess it was, an angst about how is this going to resolve?
Yeah, the unknowns.
Right, the unknowns.
What were some of the thoughts you were thinking in this moment? Was it the fear of not being on time, or was it something else?
No, it was about not wanting to let people down, not wanting them to feel like they weren't important, like I said earlier, and not feeling like I don't care about them.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that was at the forefront, is I don't want to let them down in their expectations. I want to meet their expectations. And those expectations aren't necessarily a true expectation someone has. It's what I think their expectations are. And this is a laid back family. They could have cared less if I was late. And that's part of this issue, is that it can be an expectation that's not even real. And then we let that impact us in our emotions and our responses. So that's why I want to keep working towards overcoming.
I love that you're sharing this story today, Ellen, because it sounds like you were able to notice your dysregulation as it was happening in the moment, and then process it with your husband, like in real time in the car. Can you walk us through the steps that you began to take when you noticed your reaction?
Well, I began to recognize it. I got upset, and that went on for, 5 minutes, maybe a little more, just going back and forth with Eric and getting upset with him. But I did recognize that what was going on. And so I just started processing with Eric and just asking the Lord to help me. I've learned that I can't do it on my own. I need God's help. So I was asking him for help. I was processing with Eric, and I, just ask him to forgive me, ask the Lord to forgive me. And, we went and got the donuts and went and had a great time. But there's that window where it seemed so out of control.
So in this moment, you began processing with Eric and trying to understand what was happening inside of you.
Yes. At least I did this time. Sometimes it goes longer. But God's helping me to recognize it faster than I used to. And it's a process it's a battle of pride underneath it. I want to look good. That is pure pride, that I want to be loved. I want to meet their expectations, because essentially I want to be loved. And it's overcoming pride really that needs to happen. And so that requires a humbling of myself, of actually confessing to Eric, I'm sorry. I know that was a strong reaction, and just needing to humble myself before him, before God. And sometimes, I'm by myself, and, it's crying out to God, just going and crying out for help. So
I'm just thinking about the shame that you mentioned a couple minutes ago that you were feeling in this moment. Was it hard to begin processing with Eric?
Once I start confessing and processing, it's a relief because I'm getting it out in the open. And he knows my issues. Believe me, he's lived with them all these years, and he's very gracious. So the processing part actually is the freedom coming. And he really helps me in that because he loves me. So I'm grateful.
One of the things that you just said that stood out to me was, I wanted to be loved.
Yes.
Would you say that was an underlying desire or maybe drive that you felt in this story?
Yeah, I do. But I don't always recognize that is it. But because the Lord's been taking me deeper levels, I've come to realize that. I've seen it clearly that is a driving thing for me. And it's where God's at work. He's working to set me free, but it's a process.
When you reflect on this story, some of the things you were thinking, how your body was reacting, do you remember the earliest time you felt this way?
I know I don't have a specific time that comes to mind. It's more of an overall environment. And I've come to recognize that sometimes we don't go back to a time. We go back to something earlier, something that's been passed down to us. Mm. And in this case, for me, it was something passed down through my dad. And my dad's wonderful. I love him. He's an amazing, amazing man. Loves people, loves to make them have fun. He serves so much. But I feel like I've come to see that he really wants to have a good reputation. And so I feel like I came under that influence in my life. And with my dad, I always felt like I needed to be his trophy. And through the years, I've seen it much more clearly that he wants to put me on display. And so I've got to be display worthy, right? So I can't be imperfect or else that will hurt my dad.
Yeah.
And I've come to see that that's really hurt me because the best thing I can offer people, actually, that this is where God's been teaching me, is my brokenness and that he's enough for me. But my dad had a saying, and I've gone back and just prayed against these things in my life, but it's not the saying in itself that was bad. It was more of what was behind it. But when we would leave the house, he would say, remember where you came from and who you represent. So it was this, wait, oh my, I got to remember my dad and where I came from, and I'm representing him. That's a heavy burden in a way.
Yeah.
And God has graciously replaced that with the same line, but I'm representing him. And that's a privilege. If there's going to be any weight of representing, let it be that I'm representing the King of Kings and Lord of Lords.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Ellen. Mm-hmm. When I just hear about the environment that you grew up in, the dysregulation that you felt a few weeks ago makes so much sense. Yeah, right. How do you think getting to know your story has changed how you view dysregulation in general?
It helps me to understand that there's something underneath feeding that. Yeah. And through prayer, I have broken and spoken against that, asked the Lord's healing. And so the enemy's going to keep attacking in that because he knows that's my weak area. But to know that there's something deeper actually helps me to realize there's a lot more at stake here than just this moment. It's a soul thing. And to realize I can't get out of this on my own.
Yeah. I'm just picturing little girl Ellen walking out the door with that phrase from your dad in your mind. If you could go back and talk to little girl Ellen in that moment, what do you think you would tell her?
I mean, I would want her to know that whatever I face, whoever I'm with, I am totally loved for who I am, apart from what I do. And that everything's going to be okay because God has it. God is ahead of me, and He is able to work in any situation. He's going to be there when I need Him. And I don't have to fear what might happen with people because I already have this solid foundation of being totally loved, chosen. I was picked out, and that, and the privilege of that. So going back to, I will share something that happened to me recently as I was, again, just recognizing shame coming. And as I turned to the Lord for help, crying out, and He said, what He led me to ask, or led me to see, was the face of Jesus asking me what He asked Peter. And He said, Peter, who do you say that I am?
Yeah.
That was such a huge thing. And I want to go there now. I want to go to the face of Jesus and hear Him saying to me, who do you say that I am? And to rehearse that. That's the answer. That's the help I need in those moments.
Would you say that's what God would have wanted little girl Ellen to know?
Who He is. Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
That when we know who He is, it changes the equation. But if we really every day totally rested in the fact that He's in control, that we're loved, that His purposes are being fulfilled, and that we're not going to get in the way of that, and that He hears us, He sees us, we are seen for who we are, it would change everything. We could walk and rest, and that's what I want. That's what I want.
Yeah. I love what you said there about truly resting in God's control. Just thinking about my own story, I so often find myself believing that truth in my head, but it not sinking down into my body and steering my reactions.
Yes.
How have you seen yourself change over the years as that truth has sunk deeper?
I think it's given me more capacity to walk with hurting people. This is one thing that comes to mind. Often in my ministry, I'm walking with people who are in a season of deeply experiencing pain, or who are hurt by something or someone, whatever it is. And it used to be that I would, sometimes when my husband was in that international role, there were times when we knew there was something hard coming for someone ahead. And I just had to stop. And I would feel like, this heaviness about how that was going to impact them. But now I can truly say, God has something great here. God has something big for them, even though this is going to be painful. He's going somewhere. He's in control, and He loves them. So I can trust His heart for them in this, and He's going to use it in a way that is going to powerfully cause them to walk in more freedom, or maybe enhance their ministry, or deepen their love for Him and understanding of His love for them. So, I know that's one of the ways it's impacted me. But it does help me to release things more quickly.
Yeah. So trusting in God's heart.
Yes. For myself and for others. Yeah. It doesn't it all come down to faith? Isn't that what it says in Ephesians 2, that we're going to be on showcase for what? It's going to be for our faith, the grace that's been shown to us, and us accepting that grace. That's what's going to be showcased. Yeah. So when we go through these hard things, it's about faith and growing in faith. And for everyone that's listening out there, I just pray that together we can all grow in our faith, in our understanding of who He is, and to believe it's true for myself and for all of us. Yeah.
Oh, that's so beautiful. As a final question, just to wrap up our conversation, I'm curious about what you've been learning recently about staying emotionally grounded in hard spaces.
Yeah, I think for me, especially with my issue revolving around pride, I feel like a big thing I'm learning is the importance of humbling myself. And I said earlier, if I can't do anything to change this in my life, it requires something outside of me. And so to immediately be able to cry out to God and to ask, sometimes all I do is just help me, Lord. Just help me, Lord. If that's all I can say, that's enough to start the process.
Yeah.
Help me. And I'd say that crying out to Him requires that humility that I'm not enough to do it myself, but I have someone who will strengthen me, uphold me. There's this picture. Oh, I should have looked up the reference, but I think it's either Psalm 63:6 or 68 something, but it says, I cling to you and your right hand upholds me. So what I get from that is this picture. When I am going down, He is pulling me up because I'm clinging to Him. I have to reach out and cling to Him, and He is upholding me. And I love that picture. It's really amazing. But it's this thing of actually humbling myself and reaching out for help. And the other is reaching out to others to help me to see myself really and help me process that whole whatever I'm going through.
It's like how to reach out to God and other people in the moment because we can't do it alone.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for this conversation today, Ellen. I'm really grateful for you and for our time together today.
Well, thank you. And I just want to say, as I see our TCKs, just shining, and I think about you and where you've come from and how you have just embraced the painful parts of your past. And now God is using them powerfully in so many lives. And it makes my heart so happy, Taylor, just to see what God's doing in and through you. And you were very sweet to invite me. So thank you.
Thank you, Ellen. In his book, Knowledge of the Holy, A.W. Tozer writes, "What comes into our minds when we think about God is the most important thing about us." Since my conversation with Ellen, the question that I've been reflecting on is this: what picture comes to mind when I think about God? What expression do I envision on His face? And not the theological truth that I say I believe, but who my heart knows God to be, and the picture of Him in which I most deeply trust. Ellen taught me that truly trusting in the unconditional love and sovereignty of God compels us to relax. Nothing we do can change how He feels about us, and in the chaos of life, there is an eternal plan unfolding that none of our mistakes or failures can stop. Until next week. Thank you for joining me for today's episode. I'd love to hear from you. Connect with me on Instagram at TaylorJoy. If this conversation was helpful and you'd like more information about my other offerings to engage your story more deeply, check out my website, taylorjoymurray.co.